Howdy there. I'm Swan Marion, the bookworm cowboy. And I'm about to read from a book called Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, illustrated edition. Now I'm going to have someone with me doing some of the stuff. His name's Peter, and we're going to edit this video. He lives in LA while I live here in Redding. I hope Peter has enough energy for me when I read, because he might be reading some of the other characters. Yeah. Chapter 1. I'll put on some music. Chapter 1. Dudley Demented. The hottest day of the summer so far was drawing to a close, and the drowsy silence lay over the large square houses of Privet Drive. Cars that were usually gleaming stood dusty in their drives, and lawns that were once emerald green lay parched and yellowing. For the use of hose pipes had been banned due to the drought. Deprived of their usual car washing and lawn mowing pursuits, the inhabitants of Privet Drive had retreated into the shade of their cool houses, windows thrown wide in the hope of tempting a non-existent breeze. The only person left outdoors was a teenage boy who was lying flat on his back in a flower bed outside number 4. He was skinny, black-haired, bespectacled boy who had the pinched, slightly unhealthy look of someone who has grown a lot in a short space of time. His jeans were torn and dirty, his t-shirt baggy and faded, and the soles of his trainers' shoes were peeling away from the uppers. Harry Potter's appearance did not endear him to the neighbors, who were the sort of people who thought scruffiness ought to be punishable by law. But as he had hidden himself behind a large hydrangea bush this evening, he was quite invisible to passers-by. In fact, the only way he would be spotted was as if Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia stuck their heads out of the living room window and looked straight down into the flower bed below. On the whole, Harry thought he was to be congratulated on his idea of hiding here. He was not perhaps very comfortable lying on the hot, hard earth, but on the other hand, nobody was glaring at him, grinding their teeth so loud that they could not hear the news, or shooting nasty questions at him, as had happened earlier every time he had tried sitting down in the living room to watch television with his aunt and uncle. Almost as though this thought had flustered through the open window, Vernon Dursley, Harry's uncle, suddenly spoke. Glad to see the boys stop trying to butt in. Where is he anyway? Said Aunt Petunia, unconcerned. Uncle Vernon grunted. Watching the news, he said scathingly. I'd like to know what he's really up to, as if a normal boy cares what's on the news. Dudley hasn't got a clue what's going on. Don't know who the Prime Minister is. Anyway, it's not as if there'd be anything about his lot on the news, said Aunt Petunia. But yes, sorry dear. The Dursleys fell silent. Harry listened to a jingle about fruit and bran breakfast cereal while he watched Mrs. Fig, a batty cat-loving old lady from nearby Wisteria Park Walk, amble slowly past. She was frowning and muttering to herself. Harry was very pleased he was concealed behind a bush, as Mrs. Figg had recently taken to asking him round tea whenever she met him out in the street. She had rounded the corner and vanished from view before Uncle Vernon's voice floated out of the window again. "Dudley's out for tea," said Aunt Petunia fondly. Harry suppressed a snort with difficulty. The Dursleys really were astonishingly stupid about their son Dudley. He had swallowed all his dim-witted lies about having tea with a different member of his gang every night of the summer holidays. Harry knew perfectly well that Dudley had not been to tea anywhere. He and his gang spent every evening vandalizing the play park, smoking on street corners, and throwing stones at passing cars and children. He had seen them at it during his weaving walks around Little Winging. He had spent most of the holidays wandering the streets, scavenging newspapers from bins along the way. The opening notes of the music that heralded the 7 o'clock news reached Harry's ears, and his stomach turned over. Perhaps tonight, as the month of waiting, would be the night. Give him a lifelong siesta, I would, snarled Uncle Vernon over the end of the newsreader's sentence. But no matter, outside in the flower bed, Harry's stomach seemed to unclench. If anything had happened, it would surely have been the first item on the news. Death and destruction were more important than stranded holidaymakers. He let out a long, slow breath. And stared up at the brilliant blue sky. Every day this summer had been the same. The tension, the expectation, this temporary relief, and the mounting tension again, and always glowing more insistent all the time. The question of why nothing had happened yet. He kept listening, just in case there was some small clue, not recognized for what really was by the Muggles. An unexplained disappearance, perhaps, or some strange accident. But the baggage handler strike was followed by news about the drought in the southeast. "I hope he's listening next door," Vernon said. I thought it was Uncle Vernon. "Him with his sprinklers on at 3 in the morning." Then a helicopter had almost crashed in a field in Surrey, and the famous actress divorced from her famous husband. As if we're interested in their sort of wait. Hold on. Your turn, Peter. Yes, Aunt Petunia, who had followed the case obsessively in every magazine she could lay her bony hands on. Harry closed his eyes against the now blazing evening sky. As the newsreader read, Harry opened his eyes. If they had reached water-skiing budgerigars, there would be nothing else worth hearing. He rolled cautiously onto his front, raised himself onto his knees and elbows, preparing to crawl out from under the window. He had moved about 2 inches when several things happened in a very quick succession. A loud, echoing crack broke the sleepy silence like a gunshot. A cat shrieked out from behind, under a parked car, and flew out of sight. A shriek, a bellowed oath, and the sound of breaking china came from the Dursleys' living room. And as though this was the signal Harry had been waiting for, jumped to his feet at the same time, pulling from the waistband of his jeans a thin wooden wand, as if he were unsheathing the sword. But before he could draw himself up to full height, the top of his head collided with the Dursley's open window. The resultant crash made Aunt Petunia scream even louder. Harry felt as though his head had been split in two. Eyes streaming, he swayed, trying to focus on the street to spot the source of the noise. But he had barely staggered upright, when two large purple hands reached through the open window and closed tight around his throat. "Put it away!" Uncle Vernon snarled into Harry's ear. "Now, before anyone sees. Get off of me!" Harry gasped. For a few seconds they struggled. Harry pulling at his uncle's sausage-like fingers in his left hand, his right maintaining a firm grip on his raised wand. Then as the pain on the top of his head gave a particularly nasty throb, Uncle Vernon yelped and released Harry as though he had received an electric shock. Some invisible force seemed to have surged through his nephew, making it impossible to hold. Panting, Harry fell forwards over the hydrangea bush, straightened up, and stared around. There was no sign of what had caused the large cracking noise, but there were several faces peering through various nearby windows. Harry stuffed one back into his jeans and tried to look innocent. "Lovely evening. Lovely evening," shouted Uncle Vernon, waving at Mrs. Number 7 opposite, who was glaring from behind her net curtain. "Oh, did you hear the call backfire just now? Gave Petunia and me quite a turn." She continued to grin in a horrible, manic way until all the curious neighbors had disappeared from their various windows. Then the grin became a grimace of rage, and he beckoned Harry back towards him. Harry moved a few steps closer, taking care to stop just short of the point at which Uncle Vernon's outstretched hands could resume their strangling. "What the devil do you mean by it, boy?" asked Uncle Vernon in a croaky voice that trembled with fury. "What do you mean by what?" said Harry coldly. He kept looking left and right up the street, still hoping to see the person who made that cracking noise. "Making a racket like starting a pistol right outside I didn't make that noise," said Harry firmly. Aunt Petunia's thin, horsey face now appeared beside Uncle Vernon's wide purple one. She looked livid. Yes, good point, Petunia. What were you doing under our window, boy?" "Listening to the news," said Harry in a resigned voice. His aunt and uncle exchanged looks of outrage. "Listening to the news again?" "Well, it changes every day, you see," said Harry. "Don't you be clever with me, boy. I want to know what you're really up to. And don't give me any more of that listening to the news tosh. You're pretty though that your lot," breathed Aunt Petunia, and Uncle Vernon lowered his voice so that Harry could barely hear him. "That's all you know," said Harry. Grizzly goggled at him for a few seconds. Then Aunt Petunia said, she too lowered her voice so that Harry had to lip read the next word. "Aha!" said Uncle Vernon in a triumphant whisper. "Get out of that one, boy. As if we didn't know that you get all your news from those pestilent birds." Harry hesitated for a moment. It cost him something to tell the truth this time, even though his aunt and uncle could not possibly know how bad he was admitting it. "The owls aren't bringing me news," he said tonelessly. Said Aunt Petunia at once. "No more do I," snapped Vernon forcefully. Said Aunt Petunia. "We're not stupid, you know," said Uncle Vernon. "Well, that's news to me," said Harry, his temper rising, and before Thursdays could call him back, he had wheeled about, crossed the front lawn, stepped over the low garden wall, and was strutting off up the street. He was in trouble now, and he knew it. He would have to face Uncle later and pay the price for his rudeness, but he did not care much just at the moment. He had much more pressing matters on his mind. He was sure the cracking noise was made by someone who apparated or disapparated. It was exactly the sound Dobby the house elf made when he vanished into air. Was it possible that Dobby was here in Privet Drive? Could Dobby be following him right at this moment? As this thought occurred, and he wheeled around and stared back down Privet Drive. But it appeared to be completely deserted, and Harry was not sure that Dobby did not know how to become invisible. He walked on, hardly aware of the route he was taking. For he had pounded these streets so often lately that his feet carried him to his favorite haunts automatically. Every few steps he glanced back over his shoulder. Someone magical had been near him as he lay among Aunt Petunia's dying begonias. He was sure of it. Why hadn't they spoken to him? Why hadn't they made contact? Why were they hiding now? And then as his feeling of frustration peaked, his certainty leaked away. Perhaps it hadn't been a magical sound after all. Perhaps he was so desperate for the tiniest sign of contact from the world to which he belonged that he was simply overreacting to perfectly ordinary noises. Could he be sure it hadn't been the sound of something breaking inside a neighbor's house? Harry felt a dull sinking sensation in his stomach, and before he knew it, the feeling of hopelessness had plagued him all summer rolled over him once again. Tomorrow morning he would be woken by the alarm at 5 o'clock so he could pay the owl that delivered the daily profit. Was there any point in continuing to take it? He only glanced at the front page before throwing it aside these days. When the idiots who ran the paper finally realized Voldemort was back, it would be headline news. That was the only kind of news Harry cared about. He was lucky there would also be owls, carrying letters from his best friends, Ron and Hermione. Though any expectation he'd had that their letters would bring him news had long since been dashed. But when were they going to see him? Nobody seemed to bother with a precise date. Hermione had scribbled inside his birthday card, but how soon was soon? As far as Harry could tell from the vague hints in their letters, Hermione and Ron were in the same place, presumably at Ron's parents' house. He could barely bear to think of the pair of them fun were having at Burrow when he was stuck in Privet Drive. In fact, he was so angry with them, he had thrown away unopened 2 boxes of Honeyduke's chocolates they sent for him for his birthday. He regretted it later after the wilted salad Aunt Petunia had provided for dinner that night. And what were Ron and Hermione busy with? Why wasn't he, Ron, Harry, busy? Harry proved himself capable of handling much more than that. Had they forgotten what he had done? Had he been he who had entered that grave and watched Cedric being murdered and been tied to that tombstone and nearly killed? Don't think about that, Harry told himself, certainly for the 100th time that summer. Bad enough that he had kept revisiting the graveyard in his nightmares without dwelling on it in his waking moments too. Turned the corner into Magnolia Crescent. Halfway along, he passed a narrow alleyway down the side of the garage where he had first clapped eyes on his godfather. Sirius. They seemed to understand how Harry was feeling. His entrance was just as the proper news as Ron and Hermione's, but at least they contained words of caution and consolation instead of tantalizing hints. I know this may be frustrating for you. Keep your nose clean and everything will be okay. Be careful and don't do anything rash. Well hit, thought Harry. As he crossed Magnolia, turned into Magnolia Road and headed towards the darkening play park. He had, by and large, done as Sirius advised. He had at least resisted the temptation to tie his trunk to his broomstick and set off to the burrow for the burrow himself. In fact, Harry thought his behavior had been very good, considering how frustrated and angry he had felt at being stuck in Privet Drive so long, reduced to hiding in flower beds in hope of hearing something that might never point to Lord Voldemort was doing. Nevertheless, it was quite galling to be told not to be rash by a man who served 12 years in the wizard prison Azkaban, escaped, attempted to commit the murder he had convicted for the first time. He had gone on the run with a stolen hippogriff. Harry vaulted over the locked park gate and set off across the parched grass. The park was empty as the surrounding streets. When he reached the swings, he sank onto only one that Dudley and his friends had not yet managed to break. This one. Coiled one arm around the chains and stared moodily at the ground. He'd not be able to hide and just flop it again. Tomorrow he would have to think of some fresh way of listening to the news. In the meantime, he had nothing to look forward to but another restless, disturbed night, because even when he escaped the nightmares about Cedric, he had unsettling dreams about long, dark corridors, all finishing at dead ends and locked doors, which he supposed had something to do with the trapped feeling he had when he was awake. Often the old scar on his forehead prickled uncomfortably. But he did not fool himself that Ron or Hermione or Sirius would find that very interesting anymore. In the past, Scar heard that had warned that Voldemort was getting stronger again. If Voldemort was back, that would probably remind him that his regular taste would only be unexpected, nothing to worry about. Old news. The injustice of it all welled up inside him so that he would want to yell with fury. If it hadn't been to him, nobody would even know Voldemort was back. And his reward was to be stuck in a little wing for 4 solid weeks, completely cut off from the magical world, reduced to squatting among dying begonias so that he could hear about water-skiing budgerigars. How could Dumbledore have forgotten him so easily? Why had Ron and Hermione got together without inviting him along? 2. How much longer was he supposed to endure Sirius telling him to sit tight and be a good boy? Was this the day to write to the stupid Danny Prophet and point out that Voldemort had returned? Tears thought whirled around in Harry's head, and His insides rise with anger as a sultry smell. Velvety night fell around him. The air was full of smell of warm, dry grass. The only sound that of the low rumble of the traffic on the road beyond the park railing. He did not want to know how long he had sat on the swing before the sounds of voices interrupted his musings. And he looked up. Street lamps from the surrounding cars were cast in a misty glow strong enough to silhouette a group of people making their way across the park. One was singing a loud, crude song. The others were laughing. A soft ticking noise came from the very expensive racing bikes that they were wheeling around. Harry knew who those people were. The figure in front was unmistakably his cousin Dudley Dursley, wending his way home, accompanied by his faithful gang. Dudley was as fast as ever, but his hard dieting and discovery of a new talent had wrought quite a change in his physique. As Uncle Versus delighted anyone who would listen, Dudley had recently become the junior heavyweight inter-school boxing champion of the Southeast. The noble sport. As Vernon called it, he had made Dudley even more formidable than he had seemed to Harry in their primary school days when he was first served as Dudley's first punch ball. Harry was not remotely afraid of his cousin anymore, but he still didn't think that Dudley could learn to punch harder and more accurately was cause for celebration. Neighborhood children all around were terrified of him. Even more terrified than that they were of that Potter boy who they had been warned was a hardened hooligan and intended to Bruce secure center for incurably criminal boys. Harry watched the dark figures crossing the grass and wondered who they were being up tonight. Look round, Harry found himself thinking as he watched. Come on, look around. I'm seeing all here all alone. Come on, have a go. If Dudley's friends saw him sitting there, they would be sure to make a beeline for him. What would Dudley do to him? On his face in front of his gang. But he'd be terrified of provoking Harry. It would be really fun to watch Dudley's limit to taunt him, watch him, with the powers to respond. And if any of the others tried hitting Harry, he was ready. He had his wand. It would be really fun to watch Dudley's. Let them try. He loved to vent some of his frustration on the boys who had once made his life hell. But they didn't turn around. They didn't see him. They were almost at the railings. Harry mastered the impulse to call after him, thinking a fight was not a smart move. He must not use man. He would be risking expulsion again. Dudley's the voices of Dudley's gang died away, but they were nowhere, and they were out of sight, even along Magnolia Road. There you go, Sirius, Harry thought slowly. Nothing rash. Kept my nose clean. Exactly the opposite of what you'd have done. He got to his feet, he said, and between and Uncle Vernon seemed to feel that whenever Dudley turned him was the right time to go home. Any time after that was much too late. Uncle Vernon had turned to lock Harry in the shed and he came home after Dudley ever again. So stifling a yawn, and still a scowl, Harry set off towards the park gate. Magnolia Road, like Turbot Drive, was full of large square houses with perfectly manicured lawns, all owned by large, small square owners who drove very clean cars similar to Uncle Vernon's. Harry preferred roaming by night, when the curtain windows made patches of jewel bright colors in the darkness. And he ran no danger of hearing disapproving letters about his delinquent appearance when he passed the householders. He walked quickly so that halfway along Magnolia's road, Dudley's gang came into view. They were saying their farewells at the entrance to Magnolia Crescent. Harry stepped into a shadow of a large lilac tree and waited. "We look like a pig, didn't they?" Malcolm was saying to guffaws of the others. "Nice right hook, Big D," said Piers. Said Dudley. "Wrong my place. My parents will be out," said Gordon. Said Dudley. "Bye, Dad." "See ya, Big D." Harry waited for the rest of the gang to move on before setting off again. When their voices had faded once more, he had headed around the corner into Magnolia Crescent, and by walking very quickly, he soon came within hailing distance of Dudley. But from hailing distance of Dudley, who was strolling along at ease, humming tunelessly. "Hey, Big D." "Hi, Big D." Dudley turned. He grunted. "Long you been Big D then?" said Harry. Found Dudley turning away. "Cool name," said Harry, grinning and falling into the step beside his cousin. "But you'll always be equal Duddykins to me," said Dudley, whose hammer-like hands had curled into fists. "Don't the boys know what your mum calls you? You don't tell her to shut her face. What about Pocken or Dinky Diddledums? Can I use them then?" Dudley said nothing. The effort of keeping himself from hitting Harry seemed to demand all self-control. "So who have you been beating up tonight?" Harry asked in his vague grin. "Another 10-year-old. I know you did Mark Evans 2 nights ago." "No, Dudley." "Oh, yeah? Yeah, do you say you look like a pig that's been taught to walk on its hind legs? Because it's all cheek, it's true." "That is true." Muscle was twitching in Dudley's jaw. It gave Harry no satisfaction to know how furious he was making Dudley. He felt as though he was stamping off his own frustration into his cousin, the only outlet he had. They turned right down the narrow alleyway which Harry had seen first series and which formed a shortcut between Magnolia Crescent and Wisteria Walk. It was empty and much darker than the streets it linked because there were no street lamps. Their footsteps were muffled between garage walls on one side and a high fence on the other. Dudley said after a few seconds. "What thing?" Harry grinned again. "Not as stupid as you looked at it, all you did. But I suppose if you were, you wouldn't be able to walk and talk at the same time." Harry pulled out his wand. He saw Dudley look sideways at it. Dudley said at once, "How do you know they haven't changed the rules, Big D?" said Dudley, though he didn't sound completely convinced. Harry laughed softly. Dudley snarled. "Whereas you just need 4 mates behind you before you can beat up a 10-year-old. You know that box I keep banging on about? How old was your opponent? 7? 8? Snarled Dudley. "Running to Daddy now. Are you? Is Zickle Buckingham champion frightened of nasty Harry's wand?" sneered Dudley. This is night, Dickens. That's what we call it when it goes all dark like this. Dudley snarled. Stop walking. Harry stopped too, staring at his cousin. From the little he could see of Dudley's large face, he was wearing a strange, triumphant look. What do you mean? I'm not afraid when I'm in bed, said Harry, completely nonplussed. What am I supposed to be afraid of? Pillows or something? Or something else? Said Dudley breathlessly. What do you mean? Harry said again, but there was a cold, plunging sensation in his stomach. Had he visited the graveyard last night in his dreams? Dudley gave a harsh bark of laughter, then adopted a high-pitched, whimpering voice. You're lying, said Harry automatically, but his mouth had gone dry. He knew Dudley wasn't lying. How else would he know about Cedric? Shut up! Said Harry quietly. Shut up, Dudley, I'm warning you. Dudley backed into the alley wall. Harry was pointing his wand directly at Dudley's heart. Harry could feel 14 years' hatred of Dudley pounding in his veins. What wouldn't he give to strike now? To jinx Dudley! So he'd have to crawl home like an insect, struck dumb, sprouting feelers. Don't you ever talk about that again, Harry snarled. Do you understand me? I said, do you understand me? Do you understand me? Dudley gave an odd, shuddering gasp, as though he had been doused in icy water. Something had happened to the night. The star-strewn indigo sky was suddenly pitch black and lightless. Stars, the moons, the misty street lamps at either end of the alley had vanished. The distant rumble of cars and the whisper of trees had gone. The balmy evening had suddenly piercingly, bitingly cold. They were surrounded by total impenetrable, silent darkness, as though some giant hand had dropped a thick and icy mantle over the entire alley, blinding them. For a split second, Harry thought he had done magic without meaning to, despite the fact that he had been resisting as hard as he could. Then his reason caught up with his senses. He didn't have the power to turn off the stars. He turned his head this way and that, trying to see something. The darkness pressed on his eyes like a whiteless veil. His terrified voice broke in Harry's ear. I'm not doing anything. Shut up and don't move. I said shut up. Harry stood stock still, turning his sightless eyes left and right. The cold was so intense he was shivering all up. Goosebumps had erupted up at his back. Arms and his hairs on the back of his neck were standing up. He opened his eyes to the fullest extent, staring breakingly around unseen. It was impossible. It couldn't be here. Not until ringing he strained his ears. He heard them before he saw them. Dudley whimpered. Will you shut up? Harry hissed. I'm trying to listen. But he fell silent. It was just the thing he had been dreading. There was something in the alley apart from themselves. Something that was drawing long, hoarse-rattling breaths. Harry felt a horrible jolt of dread as he stood trembling in the freezing air. And here's a picture of a dementor. Dudley, shut! Wham! Fist made contact with the side of Harry's head, lifting him off his feet. Small white lights popped in front of his eyes. For the second time in an hour, Harry felt as though his head had been cleaved in two. Next moment, he had landed hard on the ground and his wand had flown out of his hand. You moron, Dudley! Harry yelled, his eyes watering in pain as he scrambled to his hands and knees, feeling around frantically in the backless He heard Dudley plundering away, hitting the alley fence, stumbling. Dudley, come back! You're running right at it! Then he felt a horrible squealing yell, and Dudley's footsteps stopped. At the same moment, Harry felt a creeping chill behind them that could only mean one thing. There was more than one. Dudley, keep your mouth shut! Whatever you do, keep your mouth shut! One! Harry smiled frankly, his hands flying over the ground like spiders. Where's one? Come on. Do most. Said the spell automatically, especially for light to help him in his search. And to his disbelieving right, Louis light spread inches from his right hand. One tip has ignited. Harry snatched it up, scrambled to his feet, and turned around. His stomach turned over. Maybe something goes over. Hold on, change the music. Something a bit more sinister. A towering, hooded figure was gliding up smoothly towards him, hovering over the ground. No feet or face visible beneath its robes, sucking on the night as it came. Stumbling backwards, Harry raised his wand. Expecto Patronum! A silvery wisp of vapor shot from the tip of his wand, and the Dementor slowed. But the spell hadn't worked properly, tripping over his own feet. Harry retreated further as the Dementor bore down upon him, panic fogging his brain. Concentrate! A pair of gray, slimy-scabbed hands slid from inside the Dementor's robe, reaching for him. The rushing noise filled Harry's ears. Expecto Patronum! A silvery wisp of vapors. His voice sounded dim and distant. Another wisp of silver smoke, feebler than the last, drifting from the wand. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't work the spell. There was laughter inside his own head. Shrill, high-pitched. He could smell the Dementor's putrid death, cold breath filling his own lungs, drowning him. Think of something happy. But there was no happiness in him. The Dementor's icy fingers were closing on his throat. High-pitched laughter was growing louder and louder, and a voice spoke inside his head. Battle to death. It might even be painless. He was never going to see Ron or Hermione again. And the face pierced clearly into his mind as he fought for breath. Expecto Patronum! An enormous silver stag ripped it from the tip. And this is it. Of Harry's wand, its antlers caught the Dementor in the place where the heart should have been. It was thrown backwards, weightless as darkness, and as the stag charged, the Dementor swooped away. Bat-like and defeated. This way! Harry shouted at the stag, wheeling around. He sprinted down the alley, holding the lift wand aloft. Dudley! Dudley! He had run barely a dozen steps when he reached them. Dudley was curled up on the ground, his arms clamped over his face. The second Dementor was crouching low over him. gripping his wrist in his slimy hands, pressing them slowly, almost lovingly apart, lowering his head towards Dudley's face as though about to kiss him. Get it! Harry bellowed. With a rushing, roaring sound, the silver stag he had conjured came galloping past him. Dementor's eyes faithless. His was barely an inch from Dudley's when the Sillanders caught it. The thing was thrown up into the air and, like its fellow, soared away and was absorbed into the darkness. The stag descended to the end of the alleyway and dissolved into silver mist. Moon, stars, and street lamps burst back into life. A warm breeze swept the alleyway. Trees rustled in the neighboring gardens, and the mundane rumble of cars in Magnolia Crescent filled the air again. Harry stood quite still, all his senses vibrating. Hold on. Trees rustled in neighboring gardens, and mundane rumble of cars in Magnolia Crescent filled the air again. Harry stood quite still, all his senses vibrating, taking in the abrupt return to normality. After a moment he became aware that his shirt was sticking to him. He was drenched in sweat. He did not believe that what was happening. Dementors here in Little Winging. Dudley lay curled up and on the ground, whimpering and shaking. Harry bent down to see whether he had been in the fit state to stand up. But then he heard loud running footsteps running behind him. Instinctively, raising his wand again, he spun on his heels facing the newcomer. Mrs. Figg, their batty old neighbor, came panting into sight. Her grizzled gray hair was escaping from its hairnet. A clanking string of shopping bags was swinging from her wrist, and her feet were halfway out of her tartan carpet slippers. Harry made to stow his wand hurriedly out of sight, but she shrieked. Here ends the chapter.